Welcome to the MNM Podcast. On the show, we will discuss all things music and movies, sharing our love for our favorite albums and characters through the decades. Now I want to introduce my co-host and college buddy, Alex.
Hey everyone, I'm Alex, and here with my good buddy Mitch from college. And today we are here to talk everything and anything Batman. And
Yes.
and to help us out, we're going to bring our, I'd say, beloved Batman scholar, Al.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
There we go. And I'd say Mitch is up there for the scholarly level with Al as well. These guys are huge Batman fans. I'm going to be listening to them. I'm going to be learning a lot today from them, actually.
That's good.
So
Yeah, I would say Al is the only person I've ever met who likes the Cape Crusader as much as I do. So enough talk, grab your popcorn, and let's get to the movies.
all right, hey everybody, and you're welcome to MNM Podcast. We're here today with our first guest, Al-Raffay.
Pleasure to be on board, guys. It's an honor. I love Batman as much as anybody, arguably more, but yeah.
I did introduce you, Al, as
Okay.
our Batman scholar, actually.
Yeah.
And I mentioned Al, and this is still true. I've never met anyone who loves Batman as much as I do until I met you, and you might like him even more. So it was great that our paths crossed in university. But yeah, Alex, why don't you give us a little bit of a history on Batman? And obviously it started out as a comic book.
Yeah, so as just novice Batman fan, I was trying to do what I can to learn more, because these guys, I was obviously influenced by these guys to learn more about Batman. But Al and I were in film class, and we graduated. I graduated school with that, so I did a lot of noir movies I watched, and Batman is a noir character, and it was cool to see like the detective aspect of him more, because I just saw him as like the big he's kind of the brute,
very poor choice of words.
like a brawler hero, but I didn't see the detective part of him until I started learning more of his origins. And it was interesting to see, because we all know he has a no-kill rule, but I heard that he, in the earlier comics when he first was introduced, he had a gun, and he had that no-kill rule. So it was really interesting to see him like the gritty detective and then moving into a more like superhero era, which is interesting.
For sure.
Yeah. And the first appearance of Batman was I believe May of 1939. And
This guy.
Yeah.
He's got it.
You're exactly right.
Yeah, and then the comic line that he debuted in was actually called Detective Comics, which is, shows how much of like the detective, I guess, aspect was like a key part of that character. And on top of that, if I'm not mistaken, I think Detective Comics, if you take the first initial of both, was what informed like the DC Comics, like that term. But yeah,
for sure, it's definitely, I would say, my favorite like air quotes superhero, because that'll get a lot of people riled up because he doesn't have superpowers, but to me that's kind of what makes it even better. But
well, world's greatest detective, I'd say that's a pretty big superpower. But yes, not superpower.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to mention with the history is there's kind of some different storytelling in terms of like obviously different movies, different comic book series around Batman about like his origin in terms of like what inspired him to be Batman. It's all around obviously him and his parents like leaving the theater, and like his parents Thomas and Martha Wayne getting shot. But one thing that differs is some of the different storytellings. It's like in some of them he knows who killed his parents, and then in others he doesn't know who killed them, and I think I just found that kind of interesting. It's like what do you think would be better, if he knows or if he doesn't know? And some people think the Joker killed his parents, most people disagree, but that's just something that's out there.
I feel what has a greater narrative impact is it being like a regular criminal, like a Joe Cho, than like a Joker, because otherwise it's like, I don't know, because his crusades against crime in general, it's not necessarily just Joker.
Yeah.
So by having it be a regular criminal, that works better. And then I can see the sorry guys, somebody just knocking at my door.
No problem.
I guess we can edit this
That was
part
okay.
out.
Yeah, no problem.
Yo,
Go ahead.
come in. Yo, come in. Come in. What's up? You guys dipping? All right. Yeah, no worries. All right. I hope you guys had a good weekend.
Yeah, bro, for sure, bro.
Yeah. Easy.
Easy, man.
Yes, sir.
Well, hello, beautiful.
Yes, sir. Got it up.
All right.
Yeah. You had a good night.
We'll leave this in.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You
we'll
know,
listen, and then I'll
you know,
I'll say my
my
2 cents on should we know who the killer was or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
You
I'll
wanted me to
start.
start with that
I'll
one?
start.
Yeah.
I'll start.
Yeah.
I'll start.
Okay.
So yeah, I agree with your point, Al. I think it's better if it's just a generic criminal, because it's not like Batman obviously has these great villains he faces on a regular basis, but that's not why he does it. It's more to just like defend regular people, like the common people, where like the police and the criminal justice system like aren't able or like aren't willing to defend them, you know.
Exactly. And
That's
I feel
the main
like
point.
with the Joker, it's kind of I like the aspect of Joker where he doesn't necessarily have like a origin story,
Mhm.
right? So it's like better not knowing his past. And I like kind of the inference where the Joker as he exists now, not necessarily just as like the criminal, but the Joker as we know, wouldn't exist without the Batman already being there, you know, because it's like crazy attracts crazy type of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that there shouldn't be. Oh, I like the idea of not knowing the killer, because when you put a face, like they're saying, if you put Joker as the killer, people claim, or some people claim, if you put a face to that, then that's Batman's goal. He's going to take justice on the Joker. Then after that, what is Batman, right? So in this way, it's
Yeah.
him just warring on crime, and to save others from his like own fate in a sense, right? That's why when Robin was orphaned, right, and he was helping him out because he said he didn't want him to turn into himself, right? He didn't want Robin to turn to Batman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ideally, something like that.
Mhm.
Yeah, like Dick Grayson, Jason Todd.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I wanted to touch on, in my opinion, the best adaptation of Batman, which is Batman the Animated Series.
Hmm.
And I think part of what makes it so great is the fact that it is a television series, so there's more episodes. They're able to tell more stories, go deeper into different villains and different storylines. But I would say maybe my favorite episodes, or at least it's right up there, is Robin's Reckoning Part 1 and 2, which is like the story of how Robin, like Dick Grayson, his parents die in the circus, and he ends up obviously moving in with Bruce Wayne and becomes Robin. And you also see like he has the opportunity to like avenge his parents' death because he finds the guy who kills his parents, and then it's that whole like dynamic of like, does he kill them to feel like the satisfaction kind of a vengeance, but then he throws his life away, you know what I mean? So
Yeah. Yeah, no, those episodes are great and among my favorites for the Batman anime series. And like that whole conundrum of like, is this really gonna change things, right? Of like, you know, is it really gonna bring my parents back? I really found that appealing, and it had like a great parallels with like Bruce's own story, you know. Because if you were to be met by yeah, if you were to meet his parents' killer, right? Like as you kind of saw in Batman Begins, would he try to kill him, or would he, you know, let the justice system do its thing?
Yeah, I mentioned that earlier before we started recording, because we were talking about Robin's Reckoning, and also like you saw in Batman Begins how he had the opportunity to kill the man who did kill his parents, and that was before he was Batman. And we'll certainly get to the Nolan trilogy, how good it was, but also like some of the critiques that Batman fans have about it. But and then he actually had a gun, like Bruce Wayne had a gun.
Yeah.
And then right before he was about to pull the trigger, someone from like Maroni or Falcone's mob killed him, and so he didn't have the chance. But I just thought that was really interesting. But
Yeah, I really like the that scene because it really showed that at one it's not like he's an infallible human being, right? He is human at the end of the day, and he still had the inklings of wanting to kill another human being. It's not like he's just perfectly, moral, like it's not like he never thinks about killing, right?
yeah. And I think for me, and I think for a lot of people, that's part of why I like Batman, is like he's a dark hero. He's not just like this shining light, like perfect, like Superman or
Yeah, he's the anti-hero he walks that line between criminal and crime fighter, right? It's like what's that no kill rule, I think, is the thing that's the one that separates him from the criminals in my mind. Like, because he does
and that's always the point of why he doesn't kill anyone. And it's even like part of the Dark Knight, right? Is like, if he were to kill the Joker, then what's the difference between him and the Joker? Kind of, right? Like, even though some people don't understand it, but I think it's a good point. But to go back to Batman the animated series, obviously, Al, you're very well versed in film and television, so I guess like I love the show, but I guess I was just wondering, like, as someone who's studied different film and television, like anime, because it is kind of an anime. It's obviously an animated show, but some of the style is similar. I guess, like, what makes it so good?
I guess it was really it showed animation on television maturing, because a lot of the shows were very, it's like black and white sense of morality, very like super child friendly, like, Super Friends, for example, where there wasn't necessarily a lot of nuance or substance to the show. So even though the anime series is a kid's show, at the end of the day, like, look at us, we're all adults, we still enjoy it to this day. And like it just feels darker, and I feel from if I remember correctly, a big part of that aesthetic, I mean, it's like the noir aesthetic, was they actually animated like the cells for like the frame on like black cells rather than white, so as to give it that like kind of feeling of grit, and like the shadows being abundant in like all the shots and whatnot. Plus, like, the writing, obviously incredible, and not to mention all of the iconic voice actors, from Kevin Conroy, Mark Hamill. I forget Harley Quinn's voice actress, but she's great
as well.
Yeah, she was great as well, and they just really had what's the word? I guess, as you said, the best adaptation of the Batman, mythos, really.
And this is my first time watching it, because I know you guys both recommended the show to me, and I haven't seen it. Like, growing up, I grew up without it, but going back on it, it's still, like you said, it's still mature for adults. Like, I'm still early in the first season, and one of my favorite episodes was Heart of Ice, and that was the Mr. Freeze one, right? And I was saying he was one of my favorite villains so far, because he is such a broken down character, in the sense of like his origin, about he can't even survive out of sub-zero temperatures. His wife was like, the plug was literally pulled on her and everything. Like, I just see him as the most like broken down villain, and I can see where he's coming from. And that's like, it's a kid's show. It's such an intense origin and intensely dark thing for a kid to watch, but it's like they handle it very well, though. They handle it well. It's not like traumatizing at all, but it's just
And I think it's like 14A. Like, it is like, it's not like rated G. Now, it's not like a kid could watch it for sure. But I think it's one of those shows where like a kid could watch it and enjoy it as well as an adult, because there's stuff in there that adult, like certain references to things like that are more serious, that adults would understand and kind of enjoy and think we're clever,
And the heart, I'm glad you brought up the Heart of Ice, because that's probably my favorite episode. And so before that, Mr. Freeze used to be like kind of like a B-list villain, you could say, in the rogues gallery for Batman. But the Heart of Ice redefined his like origin story, and kind of cemented him as this like tragic villain of sorts, where he's not doing things out of a malicious intent, really, or an evil intent, right?
It's more vengeance at that point with that the person.
Yeah, and it's like to save his wife, you know.
So just a quick question though, did he have a different origin story and is like his B, or we didn't know his origin story when he was like a B-list tier villain?
I forget what his origin story was exactly. Maybe Mitch might remember, but it wasn't anything really, I feel, noteworthy.
I'm not too sure, but I think that's also one thing that for me, and probably for I mean anyone who likes Batman, but part of what makes Batman so good is the amount and quality of the villains is amazing. Like you could ask, you know, I think most people would probably say the Joker is their favorite, and rightly so, but there's so many good ones, and pretty much all of them have, or at least most of them, have like some sort of legitimate reason for doing what they're doing. Although obviously they take it too far, and that's how they become villains, like Poison Ivy, right?
Yeah.
Like I feel like that's a villain that's ahead of her time, where like it's not just a pure villain, like it's not just like a pure like a serial killer or something. Like it's someone who like has a good kind of frame of mind in terms of like what they're pursuing. They just go about it the wrong way. You know?
It's like,
And
you can relate to them on a certain level, like, oh, I understand where you're coming from, just not your execution and how you're going with it, right? Yeah.
It's like their ends might be justified, but the means are necessarily aren't. And adding on to that, I feel like Batman by far has the best rogues gallery in all of like comics. Really, the only superhero that I think comes near is Spider-Man.
Agreed.
And what I really like about Batman's rogues gallery is like they're all, I feel like, reflections of Batman, like different aspects of his personality, really, but taken to like an extreme. So, for example, Riddler's like, you know, you could argue in a way it's his aspect of like intelligence, detective work, right? But taken to an extreme, and like we kind of saw that in like the Matt Reeves movie where the Riddler wanted justice, wanted to change Gotham, make it better because he felt like Gotham had let him down in a similar way that, you know, it let down Bruce Wayne. But hey, the way he wanted to do it was obviously not right.
Speaking of that, let's move on to kind of looking at the Batman by Matt Reeves. Obviously, that came out last year, 2022. Did it come out?
Yeah.
So that I mean, I was able to see that in theaters. I'm glad I was. I was able to, and then I watched it again about a month ago. I definitely enjoyed it more the second time. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of hear what your guys' thoughts was. Alex, what did you think of the movie?
Well, I saw it. I only saw it the once in the theaters, but I was blown away by how it was more so the detective story. He was very much so the more analytical, going around discovering the clues and everything, because I grew up with the Nolan trilogy, and that was more action packed. You saw a little bit of detective work, but not like too much. But I just like, again, I love the old noir movies back in like the 40s, 50s, the detective story and like the grit. So that's what I felt more. The Matt Reeves had that gothic dark comic book more feel to the like the zeitgeist, like the whole atmosphere, and then the whole with the action. Whereas Nolan was more, you just know it's more action based in like Chicago, right? You just know that's not Gotham in a sense. Like they did Gotham very well in this movie.
Yeah. Adding on to that, I think the Matt Reeves Batman had arguably the best live action rendition of Gotham we've seen yet to date. And it felt like a blend between Tim Burton's kind of fantastical, like uber gothic Gotham that they had, which didn't necessarily feel like a real space in like time.
Too much, like almost like too cartoony in a sense.
Yeah,
for
like
live
it
action.
felt like a little, you know, it's just like kind of mythical in a sense. Whereas I feel Christopher Nolan's rendition of Gotham, I think it was intentionally meant to be kind of like a generic American city, you could say.
Generic,
yeah, it's basically just New York City, like, and he doesn't even try to make it anything else.
Yeah, and it's supposed to kind of, I think the reason behind that might have been trying to make it seem like the stuff that's afflicting Gotham and like his trilogy could afflict any city in America. Like these problems aren't necessarily confined to Gotham only. So I see where Nolan's coming from, but I liked Matt Reeves' rendition of Gotham the most because it was like this blend between like gothic and realism, where it still felt like this is Gotham, but at the same time that it's like it real, like this could be
Yeah.
a city in real life.
I didn't think
Yeah.
about that's a good point. I didn't think about that being like it could relate to other cities and having a more social commentary in a sense.
Yeah, when I watched the Batman, like I'm obviously a big Batman fan as well as Sal. And I thought similar things. Like I thought Gotham, I thought that was the best by far. In terms of specifically like how they portrayed the city to be. I also thought it had the best like mix of villains, but also not just like the ones who get people to the box office, like also like Carmine Falcone, right?
Yeah.
Which is like people who watch comic books or watch comic books, read comic books, or had watched Batman the animated series would have like known who he is, right? And his importance in Gotham City, as well as the whole storyline around Bruce Wayne's parents and like corruption, because that's something a lot of the other movies didn't touch on quite as much as this one, which is like the reason Gotham is the way it is because of like corruption and greed and money and that. And I thought this movie like really did a good job of kind of explaining that and showing the audience why Gotham was the way it was. And I'm also really looking forward to the next one or two that Matt Reeves does, because this one did feel like it's a new Batman, right? It's a young Batman. So it wasn't like firing on all cylinders in terms of what Batman is, which I understood, because he's young, he's learning. But it made me want to bring up like, what were your guys' thoughts of Robert Pattinson as the Batman?
My initial thought was when he refused to work out more for the role, I was like, oh, Batman was supposed to be he was a brute, he's a brawler, the biggest physically and mentally strongest man, right? So at first I thought him like, commit to the role, man. Like you got to build yourself up, but he looked really good in the Batsuit. It actually like turned out very well, better than I thought. And the grounded choreography, I've ever seen the trailer of him just silently it was just like going after one like just crook, just beating the crap out of him, right? Like that was just like a moment where I was like, this was okay. All right, this is Batman. So
I loved that moment because it really showed that like, especially as like a young Batman, he might not necessarily have a complete control on his anger.
Like a restraint,
yeah, the restraint, right? And it was just kind of like in a way brute power, where he's just taking out his, I guess, rage and emotions and pain and whatnot on like, these poor criminals, if you could, I guess, see them as poor in the sense of like unlucky as hell to like come across Batman. But yeah, like you might not necessarily have like the physicality of like, let's say, a Ben Affleck type or even a Christian Bale, but I still think he was really, really effective as Batman. And I really enjoyed his portrayal. I still like Christian Bale's overall portrayal as Batman and like Bruce Wayne more, but that might just be my bias because like I just love the Nolan trilogy a lot. But yeah, Pattinson's Batman like was great, and I feel in terms of the physique that they used for this, it was more of like an MMA fighter type of physique, where it was more about like speed and agility than necessarily outright strength. And also feel, I guess, as a younger Batman, I think went more for like that, I guess, leaner physique, where it might show him bulking up in like future sequels.
Yeah. And I think I liked Patterson as Batman. I'm looking forward to the next couple. I would still have Christian Bale ahead of him personally in my own ranking. Now, part of that might just be like, I just think Christian Bale is a better actor. And that's nothing against Pattinson. Christian Bale is one of my favorite actors. I think he's one of the best actors of the 21st century. So it's difficult for anyone to really match that. But I certainly thought Robert Pattinson did a good job, and even the way they like left the Batman like in Arkham Asylum. That wasn't I don't know if it was the very last scene, but it was one of them where obviously the Riddler's in his cell and the Joker's talking to him, so you know the Joker's going to be in the next movie.
Yeah.
So that should be interesting. But what did you guys think of the Riddler in this movie? Paul Dano. That's his name, right? Paul Dano.
Yeah, Paul Dano. Yeah, the actor. Right before I jump into like about the Riddler, that scene with the Joker. I love the Joker, but I hope he isn't necessarily the main villain in the sequel. He's more of like, let's say, a Hannibal Lecter type, where Batman might come to, you know, question him, interrogate him a couple times throughout the movie in Arkham Asylum. But yeah, really loved Paul Dano's portrayal as the Riddler. Definitely the best portrayal. I mean, really the only other is Jim Carrey's. Like, really
watch it.
Overly
And Jim
campy.
Carrey's a whole nother beast himself.
Here,
Man.
we're probably not going to talk much about those early live action Batman movies. That was the Batman I watched the most as a kid, which I think tells you something, because I enjoyed it quite a bit as a kid. And then I was watching it like on TV years later, and I was just like, what the fuck is this?
And they were
like,
stacked casts too there in those movies. But yeah, sorry, I just
well, like I was just gonna
topic.
say, like, say what you will about Jim Carrey's Riddler, but he was probably the one thing that made that movie watchable. Just because he was like the goofy.
I
Riddler.
don't think it was a bad portrayal.
Yeah,
I just preferred like the gritty aspect over the campy aspect. But yeah, he definitely made the movie a lot more enjoyable than it would have been otherwise. It was just when he was on the screen, it just kind of, you know, like
felt his presence, right?
It was mesmerizing. Where he's
and I was just saying that mainly as a joke, because like if you look at the costume he wore and everything, it was ridiculous.
Did you guys hear about so Tommy Lee Jones? He played Two-Face in that movie. He's like one of those like serious actors. He hated working with Jim Carrey, and I think he said something like, I cannot stand your buffoonery anymore to Jim Carrey on set.
I did hear about that. They butted heads a lot on set. Like, yeah.
It's
just not surprising. I have heard Jim Carrey might be like sneaky tough to work with, but yeah, I mean, who knows? Obviously, I mean, he's a comedic genius. You have to say that.
Yeah, but, I just find the usage of the term buffoonery just hilarious.
Yeah,
you know.
But in terms of
especially when you're talking about like Jim Carrey, like no shit, like that's what he is. Like,
he's a buffoon, man.
He's the best, like one of the best buffoons of all time. Like he makes exactly people laugh.
But yeah, with Dano's portrayal, right? Moving back on, I guess, topic. Just another comment I'd like to add is I felt there was a subtext of that Riddler potentially being on the spectrum, like being autistic, especially in like that interrogation scene at Arkham Asylum. It did feel like that necessarily isn't the reason as to why he is the way he is in terms of like, you know, being like a villain. But I thought, you know, I might just be reading into too much, but I did give the vibe that like he might be on the spectrum.
Sure. One thing I noticed about so I'm a fan of Paul Dano as an actor. He was amazing in Prisoners. He's been in other movies as well.
There Will Be Blood,
yeah. And I was really looking forward to it when I heard he was going to be the Riddler. I will admit personally, like, I liked him for sure. I thought he was good. There were moments where I just thought it was a little over the top. In terms of some of the like hysteria, kind of.
I did see that too a bit.
Where I think he's a great actor, so I'm not blaming him or anything. I just thought there were some points where I was just like, this is a bit much.
It was like overacting in a way.
That's exactly what I was thinking. But go ahead, Alex.
Oh yeah, sorry. I felt that with the when I was watching the movie, I thought it was he tried to get a little bit of like the Heath Ledger Joker hysteria, where he talked a little bit like a little back like this, and like the cadence was kind of at first like the slow melodic kind of like hysteria, right? And at first I was like, no, I'm like, no way he's doing like a Joker kind of Heath Ledger Joker rendition. And then later I'm like, this is his own thing, and it really like he got his own craziness. But I do see some of the times where he hit the nail a little too hard in the head with the acting a bit.
And one thing I also thought about that role was it was almost extra scary in a way, because you saw the way he was like gaining followers and like talking to a community online, right, about what he was doing, and it's like, oh god, like that not that someone out there is literally the Riddler, but like there's definitely some weird communities online who are doing like
Yeah, it
You can see the real
definitely.
possibilities.
I
in it.
liked. I definitely liked the way it was like. It felt it could be tangible. Like this could actually happen in real life.
yeah
And the way they integrated like the online aspect, because it did feel like uh people that are on those type of communities, like the ones that were in on Riddler's, channel or whatever, you could find people with similar lines of thinking on like 4chan, 8chan, some
Mhm.
like the dark holes of Reddit, things like that, like those incels, for lack of a better term.
yeah.
Mhm.
But yeah, so well, I think we touched on the Batman quite a bit. So let's go into kind of the main Batman movies of our childhood and our formative years, the Nolan trilogy. And I
Mhm.
think the biggest thing I can say about the Nolan trilogy was that they brought a credibility and kind of a respect for Batman and superhero movies in general, which I think is a massive,
Yeah.
tip of the cap to
Mhm.
Christopher Nolan, because prior to The Dark Knight, there were no superhero movies that were just like broadly respected and considered good movies.
Mhm.
And then The Dark Knight in particular, Iron Man also came out that year, but The Dark Knight in particular kind of just almost set up the potential for what like Marvel has become, kind of, and superhero movies
Mhm.
in general.
And
Yeah.
sorry, and before we get into the Dark Knight, I noticed this in the movies in the early 2000s, and especially with Batman. This signaled a lot of it in the Batman Begins. Is in the early 2000s, Hollywood went through a whole like a darker phase, trying to get like more grown up aspects of movies, and you see it in a bunch of franchises. Like, well, the Dark Knight trilogy started that. Then you see the James Bond movies started to go a little more darker instead of
Casino
campier.
Royale.
Casino Royale. You see it in Transformers as well. That's another one that just got, instead of it being like a more lighthearted cartoon, you
Yeah.
see like the new era of just as like darker takes on movies. So I just thought that was
Yeah.
a kind of a cool
I
thing where Dark
definitely
Knight
think
started it.
Batman Begins, yeah, was, and along with Dark Knight, kind of started that trend of like darker, serious, more serious reboots all
Mhm.
over Hollywood, with James Bond being like the noteworthy example. And yeah, because before, yeah, like as you mentioned, Mitch, the superhero movies weren't necessarily taken seriously. They're just seen as like popcorn blockbuster movies, right? They weren't necessarily seen as like film or like cinema, And The
Don't
Dark
tell Martin
Knight,
Scorsese.
yeah.
Sorry,
Uh
continue.
We'll
yeah,
get
we're
him
not we're
next
not gonna
podcast. We'll
get
get
into
him in
that
next time.
whole, yeah,
Yeah.
that whole our superhero movies, cinema, whatever. We're not gonna get into that whole thing, but yeah, like if you look at a lot of people's like all-time lists, Dark Knight's usually up there, right? From critics to fans and whatnot, right?
Mhm.
And it was one of those movies that I feel is very enjoyable, but at the same time, there's like a lot of deeper and more meaningful subtext behind it, especially like the social political commentary. And for me, I actually read The Dark Knight as an overarching commentary on post 9/11 America, and specifically its war on terrorism. I'm just gonna, say, I guess, like the key aspects of that like theory quickly. Because the Joker is supposed to be like reflective of terrorism, this villain, this force we don't quite understand, and they don't
Mhm.
necessarily have like a rational reason for what they do. It's not necessarily money or power or land really, and that's kind of a lot of how like I feel America viewed Islamic radicalism back in the 2000s. And then a Two-Face like Harvey Dent was to represent like those politicians that we voted in to represent us, to be like the good guys.
Like the
And
white
then
knight savior kind of
exactly, and
thing.
then
Yeah.
through
They even
external,
mentioned that how he was like the White Knight in the
yeah,
movie.
Mhm.
and through external factors and forces out of their control, they get pushed towards violence and like evil, as we saw, how Harvey Dent was, where they end up taking too many losses and it pushes them over the edge. And there's even commentary on the whole surveillance state thing, where at the end with the Morgan Freeman's character Lucius Fox's like
Mhm.
Yeah.
machine, that I felt that was just like a huge metaphor for like the surveillance state.
And
And
the
then on
Patriot
top of,
Act stuff. Yeah.
yeah, on top of
Mhm.
that, Batman's supposed to be kind of like this uh extreme force, whereas like because at that time, the probably still do this to this day, but the military developed like CIA developed pretty much torture techniques that they classified as advanced interrogation. And it was basically just torture, right? And that's kind of how Batman operates, where he uses violence to get information. And the Joker even makes a comment on it in that, for me, that's like probably my favorite movie scene of all time. The interrogation scene between the Joker and the Batman, where he's like, there's nothing you can do with all your force, all your might that will make you get what you want, like make you get the answers you want.
Yeah, he says you have nothing to threaten me with. You have no power.
Exactly.
Kind of thing. And that
yeah, because it's like terrorists don't really have all that power. If you think about it, they aren't that technologically advanced, right? Yet they cause so much damage through, a lot of explosive things, which, kind of like the hospital scene where a Joker blows up a building where it was just, a bunch of gasoline and whatnot. And the Batman has like billions of dollars behind him. He has like the latest technology and whatnot. And despite that, he still wasn't really able to win that battle against the Joker. Because I really think that he lost in that movie. That like the Batman did not win in The Dark Knight. But yeah, sorry for my little.
No, that's great. I mean,
but yeah,
that's why we wanted to have you on. Like, there's probably no one else that would have thought that deeply and come up with such a interesting kind of parallel or connection with kind of real life through that movie. But obviously, we can't touch on The Dark Knight without mentioning the legend, R.I.P. Heath Ledger. I mean, I think that was his last role.
second last, but yeah.
Second last. But obviously he died before he was able to get his Oscar for Best Supporting Actor, which I think is still the only like major Oscar, at least for the actor category, for a superhero movie.
The only other one is Joaquin Phoenix as the Joker, and the Joker.
Oh, that's right.
And I wouldn't probably classify that as like a superhero movie. That's like a tragic.
But no, that's a good point. You brought that up.
Yeah.
And just like a little bit of a side note, I think that just tells you what a great character the Joker is. The fact that two different actors, have an Oscar for the same role. Like, that's amazing.
It's just a lot of fertile ground for, because the character is so, like, it's been done over and over again. It's so much fertile ground for actors to just play around with it, right?
And yet I feel like there's still so much that could still be done with it. Not that I'm saying there should be a Joker movie every 2 years. No,
I definitely have some ideas of how I would want. I'm not gonna get into it, but Mitch and Alex both know that my dream project, because I'm in film studies, I'm a filmmaker. My dream project would be to do a Batman movie, and the Joker wouldn't be like the main villain in there. He has a small part in there. I'm not going to quite explain why he has a small part, but I definitely have some ideas of like a unique portrayal. Where have you guys seen the show Hannibal?
No, but I've seen Silence of the Lambs, and I kind of understand
but it wouldn't necessarily be like Hannibal as a kind of like the character, but it's kind of to play on like if you guys have played like the Batman the Telltale series, where
we went through
I kind of want to play on Joker's love for Batman, where it's not like I don't know if there's a label really to put on it. It's not necessarily like homosexual, because like the relationship wouldn't be portrayed as like it's like a sexual like attraction really, but there's like this like deep love for the Batman that the Joker has. Kind of want to play on that. But anyways, moving back to Heath Ledger's portrayal, he was only 28 when he died. We are only a few years away from being at that age, which is just insane to me.
For sure. I mean, and even like Jack Nicholson, who was like the first. Also, we should give quickly off topic a shout out to Adam West and the gang, because they're the OGs. Yeah. And without them, who knows if any of these movies would exist?
Probably not.
They're fun. They're kind of fun. Yeah. Not my favorite, but kudos to them. Yeah. It's like when an artist covers a song, you have to respect this person who actually wrote, kind of originated the song and that. So credit to them.
Yeah, I feel like Batman wouldn't necessarily exist as much as he does in our current like cultural landscape without the Adam West series in the 60s continuing and keeping like the Batman and his villains in like the minds of audiences worldwide. And so a lot of today's Batman content, I guess, owes a debt to the Adam West series.
For sure.
But yeah, just along those lines, quick shout out to Mark Hamill. when I think of the Joker in my head, the voice that immediately comes to mind is Mark Hamill's.
Totally agree.
Along the same lines, when I think of the Batman, the first voice that comes into my mind is Kevin Conroy's Rest in
Legend.
Peace.
Rest in peace. Yeah.
Voice of my fucking childhood.
In terms of Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill, how many different pieces of media were they in for the Joker and Batman? Because I know they're in the animated series. There was the games.
They were in the animated
stuff.
series. Mask of the Phantasm.
A lot of the animated movies, yeah, like the DVD.
Justice League movies. They were part of some of them. The Killing Joke. I think that was the last movie they made together. It's an animated Batman and Joker movie.
Based on the Killing Joke.
I know Kevin Conroy was in some of the video games. I don't know about Mark Hamill, but quite a bit.
Mark Hamill's also in quite a bit of the video games. But in terms of the video games that like they were best known for was the Arkham series, which is I consider up there for one of the best adaptations of the Batman. And they had like really iconic, legendary performances in there. Because it's basically think about like Batman the animated series, but taken a lot darker, and like they pushed it a lot in terms of like the violence, the themes and whatnot, because the game series is pretty dark, from like psychological aspects to just like the actual, you know, violence and themes and whatnot. But yeah.
And then I guess we could just briefly touch on The Dark Knight Rises. Would this be your least favorite of the three, Al? Would you say? Obviously, Dark Knight.
Yeah, Dark Knight's number one. I switch back and forth between having Batman Begins and Dark Knight Rises as number two. Like Dark Knight Rises has some like problems. Like I don't think it's as polished as like the first two, but I feel like its highs are higher than like Batman Begins are, but its lows are obviously lower. So I keep switching back and forth between the two. But I guess until like the Batman came out, I thought that the Batman Begins was like the best Batman movie in the sense of like just like the adaptation. I think like Dark Knight's like a better movie, but just in terms of like if you look at it kind of like comic accuracy and like the portrayal of Batman and like the use of the gadgets and whatnot, right? Like I don't remember, for example, in the Dark Knight, there were like really any scenes where he used batarangs, for example, extensively. And I just really loved the Tumbler in Batman Begins, like the way they introduced it, and like it was just felt this force to be reckoned with, this absolute like just tank. So yeah, I just switched back and forth between Batman Begins and Dark Knight Rises as number two.
Yeah, I gotta say that I have seen Batman Begins maybe more than the Dark Knight Rises, but it was so long ago since I've seen that, and I feel like when you're dealing with the origin story, you're kind of restricted to like a slower burn of a movie, like a slower growth, right? Whereas the Dark Knight Rises, he's like solidified as Batman, he's going, and I have to give credit to Tom Hardy though as Bane, because that was one of my favorite parts of that movie was his portrayal, like, and he just got massively huge for that, the voice and everything. He committed, but
sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I'm just saying that I felt like it was more action packed in that sense, and he was. But you're right, the whole thing batarangs and the adaptation wasn't as good. I kind of
like they felt there were like a lot more comic elements, you could say, in Batman Begins compared to Dark Knight. Like the Dark Knight it's definitely a better movie, but I see it more as like a mafia movie than I do as like a Batman movie per se. And speaking of performance, I think Christian Bale's best performance in trilogy was in The Dark Knight Rises, as this like kind of like broken man in a way at the start, where he's just like despondent and like just, you know, depressed and like just a recluse, really, or this Howard Hughes type character
because of Rachel.
But
I'm glad you brought up though, Al, like, because that's probably the biggest critique, because I would say there's a difference between like kind of regular movie watchers who like the Batman movies, like the Nolan trilogy, and then like the hardcore Batman fans, like people who've read the comic books, who've watched all the animated shows and movies on the Nolan trilogy. because I think the biggest critique that I've seen is just that the Nolan trilogy, like in general, doesn't give a lot of credence to the comic books. Like it doesn't take a lot out of it. It doesn't represent it very much. I think a lot of Batman fans, like hardcore Batman fans, because we are too, like we love Batman,
Yeah.
but like kind of that community, the comic book community,
Yeah.
sees the Nolan trilogy more as just like these generic action thriller movies, which are good movies,
Yeah.
but they don't like portray Batman the way I guess they want it. But I mean, any comic book fan base, good luck trying to please them.
Yeah, like
So,
they will always find a problem with anything and everything. And so for me, like I don't really take I guess a lot of credence to like that critique really.
mhm.
Because yeah, it's just so far I'd say it's like the best live action adaptation overall. The Matt Reeves like series might have the potential to surpass it just in terms of an adaptation with future sequels, but that's yet to be seen. But yeah, so like, and things with me, it's like if you want the comic books, they are there for you to read them, right?
Yeah.
Adaptations, like live action adaptations, whatnot, video games, whatever, they're meant to be adaptations. They're not meant to take things literally, right? Frame by frame or whatever. They're meant to be adaptations. They're meant to be reinventions of the character, right? So like, for example, like the Riddler in like Matt Reeves movie, there wasn't necessarily a Riddler that you can say had the exact same origin story or similar type of feel in the comic books. And same thing with like the Joker, Heath Ledger. There isn't like a Joker storyline that was exactly like how Joker was represented in The Dark Knight. Yet to this day, Heath Ledger's Joker is probably the best Joker portrayal of all time. You know.
And that's what keeps Batman alive, what you were saying, was adaptations not being like frame for frame, because Batman wouldn't have survived this long throughout the decades if there was no adaptations, right? Because it's just people imprinting their own creativity on the character. And this is what I want to ask you guys, both of you guys, the biggest Batman fans I know, a two-parter here. What makes Batman Batman for you guys? Because I know you mentioned the detective aspect, the fighting aspect, the anti-hero origin. Like, what do you guys relate to Batman mostly with? Like, why is he such a good character for you? And who is your favorite Batman? I think that's what we kind of have to go into.
I think for me, part of why I love Batman so much was I think he's relatable for a lot of people. He suffered a traumatic event. A lot of people have. That's obviously relatable. He is quite isolated, which again, a lot of people go through periods of isolation, especially like in youth, like maybe, you had some difficult times, whatever. So I guess teenage everything. Teenage angst. But I guess I kind of just like, I also like as a kid especially, but like I admired him just because he seemed to be someone who was kind of like fighting for the right things and sacrificing like his personal life and that. And also I just found it very compelling, like particularly with the villains. I kind of got hooked at a young age, and then I was just in, I was committed. So, I can't really pinpoint one thing. I always kind of just thought he was cool too. Like, even though a lot of other people maybe like, especially when we were younger, and again, it wasn't as like normalized to be a comic book fan or like a fan of a superhero or something. I always thought he was cool, even though like other people definitely didn't.
He's at the shroud of mystery, right? Literally.
Yeah. And just like the whole paradox of like everyone needs him, but he never actually like, but they don't know who he is, and he never actually has to do anything. He can choose what he wants to do. It's a bit like James Bond in that sense. But you also asked who my favorite Batman is, and there have been some good ones. Well, there's been, I would say, three above the equator, three below for me, or four. Because we
got
should
a full
touch on all
ranking
the
system
different
here,
ones.
guys. Full one.
I got a full one. So for me, at the bottom is George Clooney. That's pretty much everyone's. It's George Clooney. I guess Val Kilmer.
I just want to add a comment about the George Clooney thing. I think he could have been a great Batman and Bruce Wayne. I just feel like the script and the directing let him down
for
Yeah,
sure.
the
That
ones
was just an awful movie. Just a
when I
terrible
when I hear
movie.
that, when I think of the movie, I just think of the whole cowl where he has to turn his whole shoulders to see, and the
Yeah.
bat nipples. So
And
that's the one
Arnold
thing too.
Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze. Don't get me
Yeah.
started.
Uma
Exactly.
Okay.
Thurman and all that. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Sorry, Mitch, go
So
ahead. You had
I
your
would
ranking.
I would
Yeah.
say I have what's his name? George Clooney last, Val Kilmer, Ben Affleck, Michael Keaton, Robert Pattinson, Christian Bale, and then I would put Kevin Conroy in his own category because it's different. It's a
Yeah.
different thing. But
And with
he's
Adam West,
great.
I assume too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
have
I would say the same with
exactly
Adam West.
my rankings are exactly the same, and like Kevin Conroy and Christian Bale are at the top for me.
Agreed.
But I can't pick one or the other over because it's just one's like it's like animation and like video games. One's like live action, and both of them for me are like the Batman for me. That's like
Yeah.
who I identify as the Batman. It's like how
Mhm.
when I think of Spider-Man, it's like I think of Toby.
Same.
And
Yeah.
that's why Al, I wanted to ask you what Batman like meant to you. Like how do you
Yeah.
relate to that character? Because that might help us understand your ranking system or like who you see as the Batman.
Yeah, so for me, yes, a lot of the similar lines as Mitch. Character is like really relatable and just really cool. For me, it's like this I guess perfect combination of different, I guess, aspects of my life in like a cohesive character. So like I really love technology, right? So it's like for all of like the cool gadgets and stuff, I really like love those aspects, especially in the Batman Begins where they touch upon like him making the suit, the cowl, to like design the batarangs, the tumbler. And like I used to watch Batman Begins so much that like my dad ended up like breaking the DVD in half to stop me from watching it.
And that's your villain origin story. So we'll see you in the next Batman movie. That's it.
Yeah. And it's just really the because he's just a regular person at the end of the day. I mean, like his superpower really is just being rich, but like he doesn't have like actual like superpowers. So it's like the fact that he was able to like take all of that like trauma and pain he suffered as a child and turn it into something good, so, like to be used as a force for something good to help people out. I really admire that aspect. And he could have easily just not done anything with it. He could have just easily been just like another rich billionaire asshole, playboy type, that like ends up just not really doing much with all the resources given to him. So I admire that aspect and just using it for good, really. And he's just like a cool character overall. And plus, like, all the villains just make him even better. And the villains are just like, yeah, like Mitch said, just really compelling and just captivating. Plus, like, I feel like the Batman, it's just such a versatile character that they can be so many different like portrayals and renditions and reinventions that it never really gets boring. Because you have everything from like Adam West's like, super campy portrayal to like Robert Pattinson's like overly emo aspect, but they're all still Batman at the end of the day, and just in terms of like Gotham and the villains and Batman, it feels more like real and tangible. Like the villains aren't necessarily as like fantastical or like as like Superman's rogues gallery might be, or they might have these crazy powers like let's say like Sandman or something, right? So it feels more like real, and it feels like there's a lot of fertile ground there for like a lot of social commentary and political subtext. And for me that matters a lot just because of like my childhood where my life was deeply impacted by politics and like just social conditions and whatnot. So there's like times in my life, especially by like for example living in Montreal, where it felt like it was like Gotham-esque in a way, just like the paranoia and the atmosphere and whatnot. But yeah, it's just I just love the Batman for like all really he is. There isn't one thing that makes me love the Batman, really.
I feel like that's part of what makes Batman so great and why there's been so many tellings of the story, yet they're so different and they divide opinions so much, which I think is a good thing because it just shows you how like this character in this world means so much to people, yet they have totally different ideas of what it means and how it should be, like how it should sound and look like, right? So I think that's a really cool aspect of Batman. And you brought up like the supervillains. Well, not supervillains, just the villains. But I think that's part of it too. A lot of them don't have like supernatural powers themselves, or just like slight ones
Yeah,
that
even
don't
like
really seem fantastical. You know?
yeah, even like Mr. Freeze or like Clayface, it feels like it could be plausible. Like it's
Yeah.
not out of the question of reality, you know.
Mhm.
Grounded powers in the sense.
Yeah.
Where it's like, yeah, that's how I.
And you also have like
Capabilities.
Joker, Riddler, Penguin, Catwoman. Not that she's a villain; she's like gray kind of.
Yeah.
Two-Face. None of them have any sort of powers.
Yeah,
They just have like
Falcone and
really
whatnot.
interesting origin
Yeah.
stories, right? So I think I feel like Batman in general is kind of just like the gray between good and bad almost, and it like
Yeah.
portrays how people who once were good can become bad and vice versa, and how like it's very like a thin line almost, you know, between good and evil.
Yeah, 'cause
like and
a lot of-
duality and
Exactly. Like a lot of those villains have trauma as bad as Bruce Wayne did, if not worse. But because of the way they used that trauma rather than using it as, because like this analogy kind of use a lot throughout my life is like everybody goes through shit, right? So it's up to you whether you use that mountain of shit to like put you down and you like you're at the top, you're at the bottom of that mountain of shit, right? Or you stand on top of it and use it as a way to like, you know, boost yourself and develop yourself and whatnot.
It
'Cause,
either
like
buries you or lifts you up. elevates
exactly,
you.
yeah, yeah.
You live long enough
Alex
to
put
see
it a
yourself
lot
become the
more
villain.
eloquently. Yeah.
yeah.
And with the Batman as well, it's like he's just an inspiring character because it's like it's he doesn't have superpowers, right? He uses discipline and consistency to get to the point where he is, right? It's almost this like psychopathic Kobe-esque mentality to like, you know, become the very best at like crime fighting, the best fighter, the best detective, right? And just using like intelligence, ingenuity in terms of developing the gadgets and whatnot to like do what he needs to do. So it's just very like inspiring for me, I guess.
For sure. That's a great point. Well, we're almost done. I just wanted to get one more thing in there because
Sure.
I have a bone to pick. Alex, this will be something
Yeah.
you can clip for the socials.
Okay.
Okay. Why do hardcore Batman fans think Ben Affleck, Batfleck, was better than Christian Bale as Batman? Like, I cannot understand it yet. If you go to the fucking like Batman Reddits and the hardcore like comic book fans and stuff, they prefer Ben Affleck over Christian Bale, which I cannot comprehend. The only thing I will give them is physically, I would say Ben Affleck looks the most like what I would consider Batman because again, my reference is mainly Batman the Animated Series in the movies, and I would say Ben Affleck, like you know, big
Jawline,
broad
the
shoulder,
chin.
jawline,
The
chest, everything.
stocky character, yeah.
But other than just physical appearance, I don't know how that's even possible. Plus, he didn't even have his own movie. He was in the Batman Superman movie, which was bad, and the Justice League movie I didn't even watch. I couldn't bring myself to watch, and I was a kid who grew up watching Batman the Animated Series and the animated Justice League movies. So
Yeah.
He felt like a side character in the movies, like in his own. Ben Affleck, I think if he got his own Batman movie, and I don't know about the direction, but if he got his own Batman movie, he would be able to flex his, you know, his creative muscles to be like,
Well, I
what
guess
Batman he could be.
that's never gonna happen
It's
because
never
of
gonna happen
James
now, yeah.
Gunn taking over the DC studios and like doing like a reboot thing. But before the Matt Reeves Batman movie, actually, Ben Affleck was gonna be directing and writing his own Batman movie, and he said it was gonna take more of a psychological route where he's stuck in Arkham Asylum, and so that would have been interesting to see. I wonder if the script ever gets leaked, but it never got far along enough, the process. Plus, Ben Affleck had some personal things going on in his life where he had to drop out of the project, leading to like the Matt Reeves thing, which, you know, I guess, you know, it worked out for the best. But yeah, other than physical, I guess representation, he wasn't necessarily like a great Batman. I guess like maybe some of the fans might point to like he was like the best fighter out of everyone, like like that we've seen so far, and like the fighting scenes were kind of like Arkham, but like I don't know if I can attribute that to Ben because that's like it was a lot of the stunt actors really in the direction and like the choreography, right? He
Plus,
wasn't
he
really.
kills people.
Yeah,
He uses a
that.
gun. He uses a
Yeah.
gun and kills people.
Yeah,
The gun I find almost worse than the killing people.
yeah,
There's no
It
way in
seems
like,
hell
weird
Batman's just
having
gonna pick up a rifle and shoot someone.
yeah.
Like, what the? What
And
is that?
I really despise the whole Zack Snyder's justification for that. Oh, this is like a Batman that's gone over the edge and whatnot. And it's
Yeah.
just like it wasn't earned whatsoever. And it's like it just removes the essence of the character. And that in itself should be like an automatic like failure of like that rendition of Batman. Just the fact that he kills and the fact that he kills with the gun. It's just no.
it's
Like
just over the edge.
I just like it was not earned whatsoever. And it's like Zack Snyder's justification is like, yeah, it's dark, it's gritty, it's edgy. It's like you can make things feel like that doesn't necessarily make him mature, right? Zack Snyder has his hard on for like, I gotta make everything overly dark and edgy, and that's what is gonna make people think it's like mature. That is not it's not what makes him mature, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the maturity you were saying is like it's not having the whole Batman as a whole, like, sorry, all aspects as a whole. Because Batman, I see like three pillars so far. Batman is this physicality, the detective work, and the trauma that he's trying to deal with.
Mhm.
And it didn't. It just showed the physicality. So Mitch, you're answering your question.
Yeah.
I think the fans like the physicality of it because a lot of movies nowadays, like Bread and Circus, very action packed, but more hollow in a sense of feeling and
Yeah.
emotional depth. So I feel like the physicality is what fans are drawn to.
I guess so.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't want to get riled up at the end, but I just thought it was a point I wanted to make because I didn't really understand. But Al, we appreciate you coming on. This was great.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
You truly are a Batman scholar. Keep an eye out.
Yeah.
One day you will see a new Batman film or series of films by Al-Raffay. And
Yeah,
I certainly
inshallah.
look forward to that.
Can
One
you reveal
day.
the name of it, Al, or is that too lock and key at the moment?
Maybe just the name of the first one.
The name of the first
yeah,
one,
because the
Yes.
way that way I have it set up, so just to throw like a little crumb out there, not to leave the fans hanging.
Mhm.
I'd want to do like a Logan type take where it's like a retrospective legacy take. So it's like, if Batman's been doing what he's been doing for let's say 20 years, what's the impact on him psychologically, on his relationships, on the city of Gotham? How is he going to be seen from like the citizens of Gotham after doing this for 20 years? And there's a lot of like political and social aspects that I kind of want to touch upon. But so I see it as like a two-parter thing, kind of like let's say like an Infinity War Endgame thing where it'd be like released like consecutive years. So part one, the working title I have at the moment would be Batman: A Legacy of Ashes, and then part two would be it'd be a little Easter egg to Batman Beyond, but it'd be Batman Beyond Desolation.
Mhm.
Yeah, because it's like moving past like pain, moving past this this like the very basic premise is like um how Batman's crusade is incompatible with happiness and how it just creates this cycle of violence and how to move on from that like towards healing, because like at the end of the day, if you really distill the Batman character, like I love the Batman, right? But if you really distill it down to like, an extreme version, he's just a rich guy that has childhood issues that's beating up mentally ill poor people, and he should have definitely gone to therapy.
It's a little
Yeah,
reductive
if
of our
you-
Dark
if
Knight,
you-
isn't it?
It is
not?
very
Yeah.
reductive, but
You don't want to think about it too much. If you think about it too
Yeah.
much, it won't work.
Yeah.
And death by hospital bills. That's the
don't-
one thing I've
don't
heard
let-
thrown
yeah.
around.
Don't let facts get in the way of a good story. And I think
No,
that's
no.
a great example of Batman. But we'll leave it there. We didn't want to keep you too long, Al, but we
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming on. This was
Thank-
great.
yeah, I appreciate you guys having me. I love doing this. We all know we can talk about Batman for hours and
Oh,
hours
we
and
keep
hours.
going.
We could do 2 more episodes of this, but
Yeah.
we really
Up to you.
appreciate you coming on, and maybe you'll come on in the future. If
Yeah,
we have
would
another
love to.
topic that's right in your wheelhouse, but yeah, we appreciate you. Please
Yeah.
subscribe to the YouTube and follow us on our socials. But other than that, yeah, thank you very much for listening to the MNM podcast. Save it for the podcast. That's
Save it.
perfect. What you're
I'll save
talking
that.
about.
Save
That is
that.
absolutely perfect.